Hello there. The night has grown late, and the city lights outside have begun to fade. Let me tell you a story, one as gentle as a cool breeze. Have you ever believed in a destiny hidden behind a single act of kindness? The story begins on a late October afternoon in Seoul, when a young man named Park Min-jun gave his last meal box to a strange woman on the street. Little did he know that in that very moment, the wheels of fate had begun to turn, setting him on a journey of unexpected and miraculous love. In the final days of October, the afternoon sky over Seoul seemed to hang heavy, casting long, somber shadows over every street. The heat still radiated faintly from the asphalt, mingling with the dust and noise of the bustling crowds, creating an unusually stifling atmosphere. Amidst this hurried flow of life, Park Min-jun's steps were slow and weary. To him, the road home from work today felt endlessly long, as if it had no destination. Min-jun had just turned 23 this year, at an age often described as the prime of youth, radiant and full of life. His appearance was as withered as a forgotten weed on the roadside. He had dreamed big when he held his university diploma, believing the doors of life would swing wide open for him. However, reality was a harsh vortex of survival. Currently, he was just a lowly intern at a subsidiary of the Taesan Group. The name Taesan sounded as grand and imposing as a great mountain, but his status there was fragile and pathetic. His monthly salary was a mere 1,500,000 won, a figure he often mockingly called a travel allowance rather than a wage. To make matters worse, the 10th of the month, the day he desperately awaited the salary deposit notification, had long passed, and his bank account remained frighteningly silent. Amidst the blaring car horns, his stomach rumbled loudly, a pitiful reminder of his destitution. His breakfast had been nothing but a 1,001 triangle kimbap hastily bought at a convenience store. The hunger made his legs begin to tremble, and his vision blurred with fatigue. He parked his old, battered scooter on the side of the road, and with trembling hands, pulled the crumpled, worn-out bills from his wallet. He counted them again and again, anxiety clear in his eyes. One 10,001 bill, a few 5,001 bills, and several 1,001 bills. It all added up to exactly 25,001. 25,001. That was his entire remaining fortune to survive the next 10 long days. In his mind, his landlady's not-so-subtle reminders about the rent, electricity, and water bills surfaced like a heavy weight. He let out a long sigh and silently tucked the empty wallet into his pocket. And yet, in that moment when his heart felt as heavy as lead, the rich, spicy aroma of stir-fried pork from a humble roadside diner suddenly wafted to his nose. The scent awakened a powerful, primal survival instinct within him. Min-jun swallowed hard, standing rooted to the spot in front of the diner for a long moment. Finally, he told himself that you can't work on an empty stomach. If he kept starving himself like this, where would he find the strength to face the mountain of paperwork at the office tomorrow? With that thought, he confidently ordered a box of spicy stir-fried pork rice. Holding the hot meal box, a bit of warmth spread through him, soothing his heart. A luxurious dinner that cost 8,001, and now he only had 17,001 left in his pocket. He hung the meal box on the scooter's handlebar and began the slow ride towards his secluded rooftop room on a distant hill. As he turned onto a deserted road near a park, under the dim, yellow glow of a streetlight, a lonely figure huddled at the base of an old sycamore tree caught his eye. It was a woman. She was curled into a ball, her head buried in her arms, as if trying to hide from the entire world. Her tangled hair obscured her face, and her clothes, stained with dirt and torn, made her look no different from the homeless people who often collected scrap materials. But this woman exuded an extreme sorrow, a quiet desperation that tugged at the heartstrings. Passers-by continued on, cold and indifferent, not a single one paying any mind to her existence. Min-jun had intended to pass by too, but the image of her thin shoulders trembling rhythmically in the darkness haunted him. His parents' teachings from his hometown to love and share with those in need suddenly echoed in his mind. He slowed down, and then, driven by an instinct of compassion, he turned his scooter around. He stopped his scooter a few steps away from the woman. Up close, he realized just how gaunt and pale she was. Hearing the noise, the woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were large and dark, but deep within them lay a whole sky of sadness and exhaustion. She stared at him, her dry, chapped lips moving, but no words came out. "Are you okay?" Minjun asked softly, his voice as gentle as a whisper of wind. The woman didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the box of spicy stir-fried pork hanging from his scooter. It wasn't a look of ordinary craving, but the desperate plea of a soul fading from hunger. Minjun looked at the meal box, then back at the woman. He knew that if he gave her this food, he would have to go hungry. If he gave her his remaining 17,000 won, he would be completely broke, with nothing to fall back on if his scooter broke down. A fierce internal battle raged between his own rumbling stomach and his compassionate heart. But then, when he saw her hands, stained with dirt and trembling from cold and hunger, all his calculations vanished. He remembered the old days in his poor hometown, when his whole family would happily share even a single sweet potato. His mother often told him, "When you are struggling, my son, there will always be someone struggling more. Helping people in their time of need is how you build good fortune for the future." Minjun turned off the engine, got off, and gently offered the still warm food box to her. "You should eat this before it gets cold." Surprise flickered in the woman's dark eyes. She hesitated for a moment before taking it with trembling hands. As soon as she opened the lid, the fragrant aroma of the stir-fried meat filled the air. She began to eat ravenously, abandoning all pretense of etiquette, as if she hadn't tasted rice in a very long time. Watching her eat with such relish, a strange warmth crept into Minjun's heart, making him feel as if he were no longer hungry himself. He reached into his pocket again, took out his old wallet, smoothed out his last 17,000 won, and pressed it into her hand. He urged her to use the money to find a warm place to rest for the night, instead of huddling under the cold mist. His heart suddenly felt strangely light, even though he knew tomorrow would be a difficult day. He turned his back, ready to get on his scooter and go home, but just then, a small, cold hand suddenly grabbed the hem of his shirt. A voice, faint yet clear as a bell, whispered, "Please, let me go with you." Minjun was stunned, frozen to the spot. He turned back and asked in bewilderment where she wanted to go. The woman lowered her head and mumbled that anywhere would be fine. She explained that she had no home, no ID, and no place would take her in. Spending the night on the streets was, for her, an absolute terror. He scratched his head in confusion. Bringing a strange, raggedly dressed woman back to his cramped rooftop room was a risky decision. His neighborhood was already a bit rough, not to mention his landlady was incredibly strict and fierce. But looking at her small frame and pleading eyes, he couldn't bring himself to leave her alone in the deserted night. "If you're going to help, you might as well go all the way," he told himself. "My place is very shabby, but if you don't mind, you can follow me." He sighed in agreement. The woman nodded eagerly, a faint glimmer of hope igniting in her eyes. She carefully climbed onto the back seat of the old scooter. The scooter, carrying two weary souls, rolled slowly through the suburban streets towards the rooftop room. Minjun's heart pounded with anxiety as he turned into a narrow alley. He signaled for her to be very quiet, trying not to make a sound. But life is rarely that smooth. Just as they passed through the rusty iron gate, a shrill voice rang out from a bamboo couch in the middle of the courtyard. The landlady was sitting there, holding a fan, her eyes sharp as a blade. They scanned past Minjun and landed squarely on the woman hiding behind him. "Who's this girl? I'm telling you, don't you dare bring strangers here to cause trouble, or I'll kick both of you out," the landlady snapped. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead as Minjun quickly forced a placating smile. He cleverly invented a story that this was his cousin from the countryside, who had just come up to find a job, but had unfortunately been robbed of her bag and ID. He earnestly begged the landlady to let her stay for just one night, promising to take her to the district office in the morning to sort things out. Seeing the girl's pitiful state and Minjun's subservient demeanor, the landlady snorted, clicked her tongue, and let it go, not forgetting to add a threat and a reminder about the rent. Having narrowly escaped disaster, Minjun led the woman up to the tiny rooftop room on the second floor. The room was only about 15 square meters, hot as an oven during the day, and still stuffy at night. An old fan creaked, a thin mattress lay on the floor, and stacks of books were piled in a corner that was all he had. The distinct, musty smell of the small attic filled his nostrils, making him feel ashamed. He scratched his head, saying awkwardly, "The room's a bit of a mess, please excuse it." The woman stepped inside and quietly looked around. He had braced himself for a frown or a look of disappointment, but her reaction surprised him. In response to Minjun's awkward words, the woman didn't reply verbally. She quietly walked to a corner of the room, placed a tattered plastic bag on the floor, and plopped down, looking exhausted yet serene. A faint thank you escaped her chapped lips, as quiet as a falling leaf. Minjun reached over and turned on the electric fan to its highest setting. The whirring blades chased away the stifling heat, but also unintentionally kicked up clouds of dust in the cramped space. Seeing her grimy state, Minjun suggested she take a shower to freshen up. He rummaged through a pile of old clothes and pulled out a faded, collarless white t-shirt and a pair of baggy, floral shorts, a gift his mother had handmade for him back in his hometown. He handed the clothes to her with a sincere apology. "I don't have any women's clothes. These are a bit big, but they're clean. You can wear them for now to be more comfortable." As the woman reached out to take the clothes, Minjun was momentarily startled. Beneath the layer of worldly grime, her hands were revealed to be unusually fair and smooth. She gave a slight nod of thanks and silently walked into the bathroom. Left alone, Minjun sat with his knees pulled to his chest, his mind a tangled mess. His stomach was still rumbling with hunger, but his anxiety about the future was a heavier weight. Was he just taking on another burden when he didn't even have a penny to his name? Yet, whenever the thought of abandoning her crossed his mind, his compassion pulled him back. He sighed, telling himself that there's always a way out, and stared blankly at the ceiling, watermarked with stains from past rainy seasons. About 20 minutes later, the shuffling of slippers in the hallway cut through his thoughts. The door opened with a dry creak. On reflex, Minjun turned his head, and then he froze. His eyes went wide, and his jaw dropped in astonishment. The person who had just entered was no longer the ragged homeless girl from before. Standing before him now was a woman with skin as fair and pure as a freshly peeled egg. The baggy t-shirt couldn't hide her beauty. On the contrary, it accentuated her delicate frame and snow-white skin. Her hair, still sparkling with droplets of water, cascaded over her slender shoulders, framing an oval face as beautiful as an exquisite sculpture. She had deep, jet-black eyes under long, curved lashes, a high, elegant nose, and lips that were full and vibrant despite having no makeup. Even dressed in those rustic clothes, she exuded an elegant, almost otherworldly grace. Minjun rubbed his eyes several times, wondering if he was daydreaming from hunger. How could the ugly duckling transform into a magnificent swan in the blink of an eye? The girl whom he would later learn was named Seo Yeon noticed him staring and blushed slightly, running a hand through her wet hair. "What are you staring at?" He jerked his head away, feeling the heat spread across his cheeks. "It's just, you look so different. I didn't recognize you," he stammered, trying to hide his embarrassment. As Seo Yeon sat down on the edge of the thin mattress and began to dry her hair, the scent of the cheap soap, which was usually unremarkable, suddenly smelled sweet and carried a strange allure. The small room suddenly felt suffocating in a completely different way. Late at night, a strange man and woman in a tiny rented room, the situation made Minjun feel restless and flustered. In the quiet space, So-yeon suddenly asked for his name. "I'm Minjun," he replied concisely. She softly introduced herself and thanked him again for the dinner and the warm place to sleep. She looked at him with gentle eyes. "You're truly a good person." He gave a wry smile, saying he only helped because he felt sorry for her. Then, his curiosity got the better of him, and he asked why someone who looked like a lady from a good family would end up in her situation. Seo-yeon fell silent, a hidden sadness flashing in the depths of her eyes. She sighed. "It's a long story. Let's just say I've had a major accident in my life." Then, the atmosphere suddenly changed, as she turned to look him straight in the eye. Her gaze was sharp and somewhat provocative. She asked, "Do you have a girlfriend?" Minjun was taken aback. "I can't even take care of myself. Who would want to date me?" Hearing this, So-yeon's lips curved into a smile so beautiful it was heart-stopping, yet it sent a chill down Minjun's spine. She scooted closer to him, her fresh breath washing over his face, along with a proposal that landed like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Then, "Be my husband." Minjun shot up like a spring, crying out in alarm. "What did you say? Are you crazy? We just met less than 2 hours ago. I'm a dirt-poor trainee, and I don't even know who you are. How can you talk about marriage so easily?" In stark contrast to his panic, Seo-yeon remained perfectly calm. She looked him up and down as if assessing a valuable item, then said decisively, "I'm serious. I need a husband by tomorrow. You're not married. I'm not married. And you even saved my life. Isn't this fate? You won't lose out by marrying me." Even though the fan was still whirring, cold sweat trickled down Minjun's back. He waved his hands dismissively, thinking this was a joke that had gone too far. He even suspected she was looking for a sucker to be the father of her child, but Seo-yeon just let out a tinkling laugh, a sound as clear as a bell but filled with mockery. She assured him she wasn't tricking him and wasn't pregnant. She only needed one answer, yes or no. Minjun's mind was spinning like a pinwheel. A stunning beauty appears looking like a beggar, and on the very first night, demands to marry a penniless guy like him? Something was definitely wrong. He tried to regain his composure, firmly told her to go to sleep, and promised to take her to the local community office in the morning to find her relatives. However, Seo-yeon didn't give up. She stood up and moved closer to him. Standing nearly at his ear level, she looked deep into his eyes and said in a goading tone, "Scared, are you? So you men are all talk after all. You get scared at the first sign of something strange and run away from difficulties. When you brought a stranger home earlier, I thought you were brave, but it turns out you're just a coward." Those words ignited the flame of pride in the 23-year-old man's heart. He could be poor, but never a coward. In a rash moment of youth, coupled with the allure of the beautiful, fragrant woman before him, Minjun's reason was completely paralyzed. He growled, "Who are you calling a coward? Fine, let's get married. You think I'm scared?" The moment the words left his mouth, he was filled with immense regret. But a man's word is his bond. It couldn't be taken back. Seo-yeon smiled triumphantly, a smile as radiant as a blossoming flower. "A gentleman's word is worth its weight in gold. Then let's go at 7 in the morning." With that said, she casually lay down on the mattress, pulled his thin blanket over herself, and fell into a deep sleep like a little angel. That night, Minjun didn't sleep a wink. He sat huddled in a corner of the room, watching the soundly sleeping woman, his heart burning with anxiety. What the hell had he just done? He had agreed to marry a complete stranger. The next morning, at exactly 7 o'clock, Seo-yeon woke him up. She called him darling in a sweet voice that left him dazed and confused. They wheeled the motorcycle out of the house to the utter astonishment of the landlady. When Seo-yeon cheerfully announced they were going to register their marriage, the landlady dropped her broom and stared after them, her jaw agape. At the district office, the procedure was surprisingly fast. From her tattered plastic bag, Seo-yeon produced a set of impeccably prepared documents. All her identification papers were complete and perfect. On the certificate, the name Yoon Seo-hyun appeared, elegant and noble. Holding the paper with its bright red seal, Minjun still felt like he was living in a dream. He looked at his legal wife, while Seo-hyun, no longer a stranger, looked back at him with a gaze softer than ever before. Holding the certificate, Minjun still felt like he was walking on clouds. Seo-yeon looked at him and smiled gently. "Well, let's go home, honey. From now on, you'll go to work, and I'll take care of the meals at home. A husband and wife should live like a proper husband and wife, right?" He scratched his head, letting out a soft sigh. He confessed to her that his trainee salary was only 1,500,000 won a month, and he hadn't even seen any of it yet. "Coming home with me? You'll probably have to suffer through thin porridge and wild vegetables. I don't have money to buy you good food," he said, his voice tinged with self-consciousness. Hearing this, Seo-yeon said nothing. She just stepped closer and reached out with her delicate hands to fix the wrinkled collar of his shirt. The gentle gesture made Minjun's heart skip a beat, and a strange warmth spread through his chest. She looked him straight in the eye and said softly, "I know. Don't worry so much. I didn't marry you for your money." Her words were like a sedative, easing his anxiety and replacing it with a tiny glimmer of hope for a future home together. The old motorcycle carried the two of them back to the cramped attic room. Stepping into the 15-square-meter space, Minjun suddenly felt that the familiar room seemed strangely different today. The marriage certificate in his pocket felt like a hot stone, a constant reminder of this unbelievable reality. He had a wife. Looking around the shabby room with its greasy mini gas stove and old fan, he couldn't help but feel a pang of pity, wondering if this was too pathetic a honeymoon suite for a woman as beautiful as her. But Seo-yeon didn't seem to mind at all. She quickly got to work cleaning, her hands nimbly organizing stacks of books and wiping the floor until everything gleamed. Watching her diligent figure, Min-jun was secretly impressed. A person with such a noble air, yet she didn't shy away from the most menial of chores. The first dinner for the newlyweds was simple. 2 packets of instant noodles cooked with a few stalks of spinach that he had gotten from the landlady. Yet, Seo-yeon ate with relish, without a single word of complaint. As night fell, the space grew quiet, filled only with the chirping of insects from the foot of the hill. Awkwardness began to set in, as there was only one small bed in the room. Seeing Seo-yeon hesitate on the edge of the bed, Min-jun took the initiative to break the silence. He took out an old mat, torn in a few places, spread it on the floor, and said, "You can sleep on the bed. I'm a man, strong and able, and I'm used to sleeping on the floor. It's no problem. There needs to be respect between a husband and wife, and you're not used to this place yet, so please sleep comfortably up there." He lay down on the floor, his back to the bed. Seo-yeon's soft sigh and the rustling of the blanket echoed in the darkness. A while later, her clear voice broke the silence. "Min-jun, thank you." He just hummed a quiet, telling himself he did it not just out of courtesy, but also because he wasn't mentally prepared to be close to a woman as beautiful as a fairy right then. And so, their wedding night passed in tranquility, each lost in their own thoughts until they drifted off to sleep. Monday morning, the early sun crept through the crack in the door. Seo-yeon had been up for some time, having already prepared a bowl of white porridge with pickled vegetables. It was a humble breakfast, yet it filled Min-jun with an unusually warm feeling. Before taking his bike to work, he pulled out the last 20,000 won bill from his wallet and insisted on pressing it into his wife's hand. "Take this and buy yourself something for lunch. I'll try to get an advance on my salary tonight and bring more home." Although Seo-yeon refused, telling him to keep it for gas, he was adamant about leaving the money before he left. Arriving at the company, Min-jun was taken aback by the unusually bustling atmosphere. All his colleagues, both male and female, were impeccably dressed and beautifully made up, as if they were about to attend a festival. His colleague, Chol-soo, leaned in and whispered with an air of importance that a new vice president from the head office was starting today. She was the chairman's daughter, a woman of great talent and beauty, but famously cold, earning her the nickname, the Iron Lady. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the entire office fell silent. The authoritative clack of high heels echoed on the marble floor. When the leadership team walked in, Min-jun quickly stood up as a matter of courtesy, but then his breath caught in his throat, and he froze on the spot. Leading the group was a woman in an elegant black suit, exuding an air of absolute pride and sophistication. A sparkling diamond necklace on her neck further accentuated her fair skin and exquisitely made-up face. No matter how imposing or unfamiliar she seemed, he could never mistake those dark, clear eyes and those lips. It was Seo-yeon, the same wife who had cooked him porridge that very morning in their shabby attic room. The blood in his veins seemed to turn to ice. He pinched his own arm to make sure this wasn't a nightmare. Seo-yeon glided past the line of employees with a gaze as cold as ice. As she passed him, she showed no hint of hesitation, not even a fleeting glance, as if he were nothing but an invisible speck of dust. The luxurious perfume wafting from her completely overpowered the scent of cheap soap he had inhaled last night. For the rest of the day, Min-jun worked like a soulless puppet. 1,000 questions besieged his mind. Why did she pretend to be homeless? Why did she choose to marry a poor intern like him? The feeling of being deceived was a lump in his throat. As soon as work ended, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Go to the back door. Get in the black car. Don't let anyone see you." He hesitated but eventually made his way to the back door. A sleek, black luxury car was already waiting. Stepping into the cool, air-conditioned interior that smelled of new, high-end leather, he saw Seo-yeon sitting there, a pair of sunglasses covering half her face. She took off the glasses and looked at him warily. "You must be very surprised, right?" Min-jun let out a bitter laugh, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I'm not just surprised. I'm in shock. I never imagined I'd have the great fortune of being the husband of the vice president of Tyson Group. So, what is this whole act about?" Seo-yeon sighed and signaled for the driver to start the car. She began to confess that none of it was a joke, but a choice born of necessity. She was indeed the chairman's daughter, and pretending to be homeless and hastily marrying him was the only way she could escape a calculated business marriage her family had arranged. In the quiet, cool space of the luxury car, Minjun was still reeling from the shock, but he chose to remain silent and listen to the confession of the mysterious woman beside him. Seo-yeon's voice was low and sorrowful as she explained that her father had used his power to force her to marry Kang Jin, the son of the chairman of a rival corporation. It was not a marriage born from love, but a ruthless move to consolidate business power. In her eyes, Kang Jin was a debauched playboy, a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. For Seo-yeon, being tied to him for life was more terrifying than death itself. The only way for her to escape those chains was to become legally married to someone else before the engagement ceremony took place next week. Minjun asked softly, his voice wavering with insecurity. So, why me? A man with nothing. Not a single thing for you to rely on? Seo-yeon turned to look directly into his eyes. It was a rare gaze, no longer cold but filled with sincerity. She replied softly that it was because he was a good person. In the glamorous yet indifferent city of Seoul, not many people would be willing to empty their last penny to help a stranger like he did. She needed a safe husband, someone who wouldn't be greedy for her money, and in that fateful moment under the sycamore tree, he was the most perfect choice. Minjun gave a bitter smile, a pang of pain striking his heart. So, I was just a shield for you? Seo-yeon didn't deny it. She quietly took a thick file from her briefcase and placed it on his lap. It was a marriage contract with meticulously drafted clauses. They would play the role of a married couple for 1 year. At the company, they were superior and subordinate, keeping their relationship an absolute secret. At home, they would act like a normal couple to deceive anyone who might be watching. After 1 year, when the storm had passed, they would officially divorce. In return, she would compensate him with a huge sum of money, amounting to billions of won, a figure a low-level employee like him could probably never even dream of. His pride as a man was deeply wounded. He felt like he was nothing more than a commodity being priced and sold. However, when the image of his sick, elderly mother back home flashed in his mind, when he thought of the bleak future ahead, his hands began to tremble. He took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and signed his name on the contract. 1 year in exchange for a future. He told himself this was the biggest gamble of his life. In the days that followed, Minjun's life was split in two. By day, he was a lowly intern, working quietly in a corner of the office. By night, in the cramped attic room, he had to face his noble wife. Seo-yeon kept her promise. She never acted like a pampered princess, still quietly cooking, doing laundry, and cleaning. Although she was sometimes clumsy, breaking a dish or forgetting to rinse the soap out of clothes, her presence gradually became a familiar part of his life. They still kept their distance. He slept on the floor, she on the bed, and between them were often long, vast silences or idle chat about work. To banish his feelings of insecurity, Minjun threw himself into his work like a thirsty traveler in a desert. He wanted to prove his own abilities rather than rely on his secret status. He was assigned to the marketing project team for a new product, under the leadership of Kim Yu-ra, a team leader in her early 30s, beautiful and incredibly empathetic. Unlike Seo-yeon's coldness, Yu-ra always showed him warm concern. She guided him step by step and even stood up for him when he was reprimanded by a superior. Her gentleness was like a cool breeze soothing his stressed-out soul. Whispers began to circulate in the office that Yu-ra had special feelings for the young man. Minjun could only smile it off, because in his heart, she was always a respected senior colleague. That was until one lunch in the company cafeteria. As he was eating alone, Yu-ra brought her tray over to sit opposite him, smiling brightly as she kindly placed a chicken drumstick in his bowl. From a distance, Seo-yeon, who was standing with her entourage, suddenly froze. Her sharp eyes locked onto the chicken drumstick in his bowl, then swept over Yu-ra's smile. For the first time since signing the contract, Minjun saw a flicker of a strange emotion in her eyes, something that looked very much like jealousy. A small spark of delight ignited within him. It turned out that the arrogant vice president did, at times, pay attention to this contract husband of hers. The new project entered its final, crucial phase, and the pressure weighed heavily on everyone as the vice president would be personally reviewing the reports. Minjun had stayed up for many nights analyzing market data, meticulously checking every number, even though there were many inconsistencies in the data sent over from the sales department. The fateful day of the presentation arrived. The atmosphere in the meeting room was as tense as a violin string. When it was Minjun's turn to present, a director from the sales department suddenly shot to his feet, loudly questioning him and accusing him of manipulating data to make the report look better. All eyes, filled with suspicion and mockery, turned on him, leaving him frozen at the podium, cold sweat pouring down his face. He looked toward Seo-yeon as if seeking salvation, but she remained perfectly still, her face completely expressionless. Just as that director was triumphantly demanding he be disciplined, Seo-yeon suddenly raised her hand, stopping him. The entire room fell silent. She slowly stood up and walked to the large screen. Her voice rang out, sharp and steely. Park Min-jun's data is completely accurate. The problem lies with your sales department's report. She opened her personal laptop, projecting in-depth analytical charts she had created herself. With sharp arguments, she proved that the sales department had used an outdated methodology, while Min-jun's data was the only thing that accurately reflected the real market fluctuations over the past month. The director's face turned pale. He was rendered speechless by her powerful defense of him. Yoon So-yeon concluded the presentation with a firm declaration that echoed throughout the conference room. We need people who work based on living reality, not reports that are just pretty on the outside but empty on the inside. Park Min-jun has completed his task exceptionally well. A murmur went through the conference room. The earlier doubtful glances had now been replaced by quiet admiration. The sales director could only bow his head, silently sitting back down without another word. Min-jun stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Seo-yeon with eyes full of gratitude and deep respect. She had not only saved him from certain defeat, but had also displayed the charisma of an outstanding leader. When the meeting ended, she walked past him, giving only a slight, subtle nod. But to him, that nod was more precious than 1,000 vain compliments. He suddenly realized that behind the icy shell that covered her soul, his wife had always been quietly watching over and protecting him in her own delicate way. After that incident, the atmosphere between the two of them in the small rooftop apartment became much warmer and more comfortable. The evenings were no longer so awkward. Sometimes, Seo-yeon would even proactively ask him about his work. Although her tone still carried a hint of a superior's authority, the way she looked at him was immeasurably gentler. One evening, Min-jun was engrossed in overtime and came home quite late. The alley leading to the rooftop apartment was pitch black, with only the faint, weak yellow light from an old utility pole at the entrance. As soon as he turned in, he saw a flashy red sports car parked in a way that blocked almost the entire narrow path. He squinted with suspicion, wondering who would drive such a luxurious car to this poor neighborhood. Getting closer, he saw Seo-yeon arguing fiercely with a well-dressed man in a pristine white suit, a luxurious gold watch glittering on his wrist. Min-jun quietly turned off his scooter's engine and crept closer. The man's voice rang out, full of mockery. Why are you torturing yourself in this place that's no better than a chicken coop? Who are you trying to impress with this suffering act? A pampered princess like you. Seo-yeon crossed her arms and replied coldly. My business has nothing to do with you. Stop bothering my life. Please leave. The man sneered, and was about to reach out to grab her hand, his mouth spewing insults. Stop being so stubborn. Just pretend this ridiculous marriage never happened. Your contract husband is probably just some dirt-poor guy hired with money. Just looking at this place tells me everything I need to know about his class. Min-jun's blood boiled. So this was Choi Kang-jin, the arrogant second-generation chaebol So-yeon had mentioned. How dare he come all the way here to insult his woman? Without a moment's hesitation, he parked his scooter, stepped out from the shadows, and wrapped his arm around Seo-yeon's slender shoulders, pulling her close into his embrace. He declared loudly, I can take care of my own wife, so you don't need to trouble yourself. Get away from my house, now. Both Kang-jin and Seo-yeon were stunned. The chaebol looked at him with utter contempt, but Min-jun didn't flinch. He glared back at him. I may be in rags, but my character is clean. That's better than someone who wears a fancy suit just to harass another man's wife. Faced with his resolute attitude and Seo-yeon's cold demeanor, Kang-jin furiously got into his car, revved the engine, and disappeared in a cloud of exhaust. When only the two of them remained, So-yeon stared at him with eyes that held both surprise and a hint of being touched. Aren't you afraid he'll retaliate? she asked softly. Min-jun just gave a slight smile. I can tolerate being insulted, but I will absolutely not tolerate my wife being insulted. Even if it's a contract marriage, you are still my wife. As a man, it's just too cowardly if I can't even protect the woman by my side. Seo-yeon didn't reply, but he caught a very faint smile gracing her lips. That night, the rooftop apartment felt as if it were warmed by an invisible flame. A few days later, the marketing project's brilliant success had the whole team bursting with joy. To celebrate, Miss Yura suggested the team go to a barbecue restaurant by the breezy river. Amidst the lively atmosphere and celebratory toasts, Min-jun, despite his low alcohol tolerance, couldn't bring himself to refuse his colleagues' goodwill. Before long, he was completely drunk, his head spinning and his steps unsteady. Seeing him drunk, Miss Yura took care of him attentively, wiping his face and helping him out of the restaurant to catch a taxi home first. Being so intoxicated, he staggered and leaned heavily on her shoulder. Just then, a luxurious black sedan screeched to a halt right in front of them. Seo-yeon stepped out of the car in a stunning black dress, but her face was as cold as winter ice. A murderous aura emanated from her, silencing everyone around. She walked straight over, staring intently at Miss Yura's arm supporting his waist, and said coldly, "Team Leader Kim, thank you for taking care of my employee. Now, I will take him home." With that, she grabbed Min-jun's hand and pulled him forcefully toward her with clear possessiveness. To everyone's astonishment, she declared loudly, "My husband is drunk, so I'll be taking him home now. Tonight's dinner is on me." The whole barbecue restaurant nearly exploded at the shocking news. The noble vice president had just called the poor intern husband. Meanwhile, Min-jun, though hazy, could still recognize Seo-yeon's familiar, comforting scent. He nuzzled his head into her shoulder, mumbling, "Wifey." When they got back to the rooftop apartment, Seo-yeon struggled to help him up to the room and threw him onto the bed. While wiping his face with a warm towel, she grumbled in a jealous fit, "You're such an idiot. Who gave you permission to get so drunk that another woman could hold you like that? Did you even think about my reputation?" Min-jun looked at her, the alcohol making him feel strangely brave. He thought his cold wife looked so adorable when she was jealous. As she was about to turn away, he suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled hard, causing her to fall onto his chest. Their faces were inches apart, their warm breaths mingling. Min-jun held her tightly, looking deep into her flustered eyes, and said in a hoarse but sincere voice, "Seo-yeon, I'm not drunk. I know everything. You're jealous, aren't you?" She blushed and tried to struggle free, but he wouldn't let go. "I truly love you, not for your fame or your money. I fell in love with you from the moment you devoured my box of stir-fried pork that day. I want to rip this damn contract to shreds. I want to be your real husband." Seo-yeon was suddenly stunned, her heart trembling at his intense confession. After that fateful night, when their hearts truly belonged to each other, the cold marriage contract was torn into tiny pieces by Min-jun, vanishing into thin air. There was no longer a barrier between rich and poor, no more distance created by dry clauses. Now, there were only two souls passionately indulging in the sweetness of love. At the company, they maintained their professional demeanor, but in the glances they exchanged in the hallway, one could still see a sky full of affection. After work, instead of sitting in her luxury car, Seo-yeon chose to nestle behind Min-jun on his old scooter. The once pampered princess now delighted in hugging his waist tightly, weaving through small alleys with him to enjoy spicy rice cakes or cool ice cream from street vendors. Seeing the radiant smile and eyes sparkling with simple joy on his wife's face, Min-jun promised himself that he would have to work 5-10 times harder to give her a happy life without needing to rely on the shadow of her family. However, those peaceful days didn't last long. Choi Kang-jin, the vengeful man, began to unleash his despicable revenge schemes. He used his power and money to sabotage the projects Seo-yeon was pouring her heart into. Malicious rumors about the quality of construction spread across newspapers, causing Tyson Group's stock to plummet. Subcontractors abruptly canceled their contracts, bringing the construction sites to a standstill and causing widespread panic. Seeing Seo-yeon grow thin, her face haggard with worry, Min-jun's heart ached. He knew all these troubles were orchestrated by Kang-jin to corner her. One evening, she returned to the rooftop apartment and slumped into a chair with red, swollen eyes. The bank had halted its loan disbursement due to an anonymous complaint. Without capital, the key project would collapse, and she would face a penalty of hundreds of billions of won. Minjun gently pulled her into his arms, giving her warmth and stability. Don't worry. I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you. We do business honestly. We've done nothing wrong, so we have nothing to fear. The situation worsened when the board of directors called an emergency meeting to hold Seo-yeon accountable. That morning, despite his wife's objections, Minjun decided to stand by her side. In the vast meeting room, amidst the shouts and suspicious glares of the shareholders, a small but resilient Seo-yeon was struggling to explain herself. Kang Jin sat there, legs crossed with a triumphant smirk, waiting for the moment she would fall. Just then, Minjun shot up from his seat in the back row. He walked straight to the podium and plugged in a drive containing the evidence he had spent sleepless nights gathering. In a calm and persuasive voice, he exposed the rival's sabotage plot through telling figures and a secret recording between Kang Jin's secretary and a contractor. The entire meeting room fell dead silent. The naked truth made that Choi fellow's face turn ashen. Minjun's presentation not only turned the tables but also earned him the respect of the shareholders for his sharp insight. They agreed to give Seo-yeon more time to resolve the crisis, but before they could fully savor that victory, a greater challenge crashed down on them. Chairman Yoon, her father, had returned from abroad after hearing the news that his daughter had married a poor intern. In the luxurious but cold mansion, Chairman Yoon slammed his hand on the table, roaring, "Seo-yeon, have you lost your mind? The person who will inherit this entire corporation marries a dirt-poor nobody with no background?" She dropped to her knees on the floor, her eyes brimming with tears, but her voice was as firm as steel. "I'm sorry, father, but I love him. Minjun truly loves me. He isn't with me for my money." Chairman Yoon laughed bitterly and delivered a harsh ultimatum. He gave her two choices. 1. Get a divorce immediately, go abroad to erase this disgrace, and continue as the heiress. 2. If she insisted on holding on to that love, he would strip her of all positions and authority and kick her out of the family empty-handed. He believed that without money and status, that cheap love would soon wither away in poverty. Seo-yeon faced the most agonizing choice of her life. On one side was her family and a brilliant career, and on the other was the only man who had warmed her soul in the cold winter's night. The domain of wealth and power had never felt so suffocating. Chairman Yoon looked at his daughter, his voice as cold as frost. "The second choice. If you insist on following that man, then get out of this house immediately. I will strip you of all your positions, freeze all your accounts, and remove your name from the inheritance. From that moment on, you will no longer be my daughter." Seo-yeon looked up at the father she had always respected, her heart shattering into a million pieces. She knew her father loved her in his own extreme way, but she also knew that if she let go of Minjun now, her soul would wither for the rest of her life. The image of the simple, plain porridge he had cooked for her, the worn mat he had given up for her on the bed, and his proud figure protecting her from insults, it all flashed back like a warm film reel. Seo-yeon gently wiped away a falling tear and slowly stood up. She silently took off her glittering diamond watch, placed her car keys and a stack of credit cards on the polished wooden table. Her voice was choked but resolute. "I'm sorry, father. I choose Minjun. I can lose all the fame and fortune, but I cannot lose the one person who was willing to sacrifice everything for me. I'll be leaving now." Chairman Yoon was stunned into silence. He couldn't believe that his usually obedient daughter would dare to give up a financial empire for a love he considered cheap. His furious shouts echoed behind her, but Seo-yeon did not look back. She walked out of the mansion's gate, leaving the dazzling lights behind to step into the darkness, where the man who was waiting for her with a sincere heart was. By the time she returned to the small attic room, it was late at night. There were no more luxury cars to pick her up, no more designer dresses, only a small Seo-yeon, with eyes swollen from crying. Minjun rushed out to greet his wife. He didn't ask a single word, just silently pulled her into a tight embrace, letting the warmth of his chest soothe her pain. She rested her head on his shoulder and sobbed, "My love, I've lost everything. I only have you now." Minjun gently stroked her hair and whispered softly, "Silly, having me means you have everything. We can earn money, but you don't find a soulmate a second time. I'll provide for you. I promise I won't let you suffer." From that day on, the 15-square-meter attic room officially became their home, A young lady who was used to being waited on hand and foot now had to fumble clumsily with housework. Once, she was making kimchi stew but mistook sugar for salt, making the dish strangely sweet. Another time, her delicate hands were covered in blisters from washing clothes by hand in cold water. But what impressed Minjun the most was that Seoyeon never once complained. She quietly learned to haggle for every bunch of vegetables at the market and learned to be frugal with her husband's meager intern salary. Feeling for his wife, Minjun threw himself into his work. Outside of his hours at the company, he took on extra jobs doing deliveries, coding at night, and writing reports for hire. Every night, he would often work until 2 or 3 in the morning. During those times, Seoyeon would stay awake with him, sometimes fanning him to cool him down, other times making him a fragrant cup of coffee. Though the attic was cramped and hot, it was always filled with laughter and understanding. Heaven doesn't forsake those with true hearts. Thanks to his extraordinary efforts, Minjun passed his internship with a perfect score. On the day he signed his official contract, his hands trembled when he saw his starting salary was 15 million won, plus performance bonuses. To the wealthy elite, that amount was nothing, but for the young couple at that time, it was a salvation. The sweet fruit of their sleepless nights of work. That evening, they went out for a hearty barbecue meal, and Seoyeon's smile, radiant under the lights, seemed to melt away all their past fatigue. However, the final trial still found its way to them. One day, Chairman Yoon's secretary arranged a meeting with Minjun at one of the city's most luxurious cafes. The chairman sat there, his demeanor as imposing as a great mountain. He pushed a thick envelope containing 1 billion won toward him, and coldly demanded that he disappear from his daughter's life. Minjun looked at the sum of money that could change a person's entire fate, then calmly pushed it back. Chairman, our love is not something that can be valued with money. I truly love Seoyeon, and I will prove that I can protect her. Just as the tension was at its peak, Seoyeon ran in. She gripped Minjun's hand tightly and revealed a secret she had kept for the past 3 years. It turned out that Minjun was the poor scholarship student from the corporation years ago, whom she had silently watched and admired from afar for a long time. Her pretending to be homeless was also a fateful arrangement for her to test his kind heart. Chairman Yoon was stunned. He looked at the young couple, his gaze suddenly wavering in a strange way. A real storm hit when the Taizan group was framed by Choi Kang-jin to the point of near bankruptcy, and Chairman Yoon fell ill and had to be rushed to the hospital. In the midst of the crisis, it was Minjun and Seoyeon who turned their attic room into a command center. With Minjun's intellect and Seoyeon's insight, they stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights to find evidence of Kang-jin's shell companies and bribery. That file turned the tables, saved the entire corporation, and brought the villains to light. Lying in his hospital bed, Chairman Yoon understood everything. He realized that when the whole world had turned its back, it was the daughter he had kicked out and the son-in-law he had despised who were the only ones to save the family. One weekend afternoon, the chairman's luxury car stopped at the entrance of the small alley. He got out, leaning on a cane, and walked into the attic. Seeing her father, Seoyeon burst into tears. Chairman Yoon placed a hand on Minjun's shoulder, his voice trembling with regret. I was wrong. Thank you, both of you, for not abandoning me. You are truly the man most worthy of my daughter. A year later, life was back on a brighter track than ever before. Minjun became a deputy department head through his own merit, and Seoyeon also returned to her position as vice president. They still kept their weekend habit of visiting the old attic, the place that held the most beautiful memories of their love. On the evening of their first wedding anniversary, on a breezy rooftop under the shimmering candlelight, Seoyeon handed her husband a small box. Inside wasn't a lavish gift, but a pregnancy test showing 2 clear lines, along with an ultrasound photo of a tiny new life. Minjun was overjoyed. He lifted his wife into the air, their happy laughter echoing across the city's night sky. 9 months and 10 days later, a baby girl named Seo-ah was born into the boundless love of the entire family. Standing by the cradle, watching his daughter sleep soundly, her tiny hand gripping his finger, Minjun smiled softly. He remembered the spicy, stir-fried pork rice box and the loose change from that day. If he hadn't stopped back then, he might not have found this wonderful destiny. Doing a good deed is sometimes just a choice made in a moment, but it can light up an entire lifetime. To him, the wife he had found on the side of the road that year was the most priceless gift God had ever given him.